Hello everyone, and welcome to my recap and review of the episode Datalore, where we meet Data's evil twin and watch Wesley save the day. Again. Don't forget about the spoilers, otherwise, enjoy. The Enterprise is passing through the Omicron Theta star system where Data was first discovered, and Picard thinks it's well worth a visit to try and unravel some of the mysteries surrounding his initial construction. As the Enterprise arrives, it appears this colony is completely barren and dead where there should be farmlands. As Data takes a moment to consider it all, we get some backstory about how he was initially programmed with the memories of the colonists. Picard would love to lead an awaiting down to find out himself what happened, but knows Riker would kick up a hissy fit if he did, especially considering everyone in the colony mysteriously disappeared. Once on the surface, or that same fucking studio set again, it's clear the world is indeed completely dead, possibly from around the time Data was discovered some 26 years ago. As Data takes him to where he was found, Yar asks why he was given the memories of all the colonists. He isn't sure, but thinks it was done in a hurry and then dumped out in the open for someone to discover him. LaForge reports he's seeing a fake door behind the rock face which awakens a memory remnant in Data, explaining how it looks like the colonists were trying to hide whatever they were doing from the outside world, and that a fear of being discovered is what led them to store their information in Data. LaForge manages to open the hidden door and they await him explore the area, going through a series of corridors before coming across a large lab. As they take a look around, Riker comments on a series of children's drawings which Data says feels familiar and dangerous but doesn't know what it represents, and then gets an impression of a workbench nearby belonging to a chap called Dr. Noonien Soong. They do some more exploring before coming across some sort of storage area. They opened it up to reveal what looks like another copy of Data, disassembled, even though it looks nothing like him. I mean, just look at that hair. Data is of course very intrigued and immediately wants to assemble it to find out if it's another version of him or perhaps a long-lost brother. With the parts back on the ship, they begin the process of reassembling this new mystery android. And hey look, it's Chief Engineer Argyle. Finally some consistency. Does this mean we now have a permanent Chief Engineer? Oh. In the conference room, Riker and LaForge try to ask Data sensitive questions but keep stumbling over themselves because they don't want to offend Data just because he's a machine. So Picard tells them to cut that shit out and just be direct about it because at the end of the day we're all just machines, just of a different type. So they try to get on with it and Riker shows him the drawings from earlier, but then Dr. Beverly calls in and says they need Data back for some help. Back in the lab, Data shows Dr. Beverly his off switch and then tries to crack a joke, which I actually found kind of funny. Alas, Dr. Beverly doesn't seem to have a sense of humour, but she does promise never to tell anyone about his off switch, because you just can't have that kind of information floating about for just anyone to know. He also gives them permission for them to open him up so they can get a better understanding of how to connect up his duplicate and activate him, so we get a quick scene showing the team working on both androids before finally completing their work. Picard and Riker check in to see what's going on, and it's remarkable how that earlier rubber head looked so different now it looks exactly like Data. Picard wonders which of them was activated first when suddenly the duplicate wakes up and tells him that Data was the first and that he was created to replace him because Data was considered imperfect before revealing his name to be Lore, thus immediately revealing that this is going to be an evil twin episode. As Picard discusses with Data the implications going forward, Lore is getting a lesson in helm control from LaForge and Wesley. He seems to pick it all up pretty quickly, but when Riker tries to test him, Lore starts to answer but then cuts himself off and suddenly pretends he doesn't understand before giving us an odd facial tick. Data comes up and invites him along for a walk, and he points out that Riker tricked him into revealing more than he intended. Lore agrees and says Riker is not nearly as dumb as he thought, and if we needed any more indication that Lore is perhaps not the nicest individuals, insults Wesley and then tells Data not to be jealous of his abilities. In Data's quarters, Lore reveals he knows a lot about their father as well as demonstrating the ability to make jokes and having a wide range of emotions. He explains their father was definitely smarter than the average bear, but it's also clear he has contempt for him and other humans, and further insults Data in his quest to be more like them when they're clearly far superior. He does that odd facial tick again, and further explains that yes, he did lie earlier about who was built first, and it was actually Lore, but apparently the colonists don't like androids with massive superiority complexes and wanted him modified or deactivated. So Soong created Data, but without all the emotions that made Lore the obvious twat that he is. But then Data says he's obligated to report to Picard everything that Lore has told him, including the various lies he's told so far. Lore then asks if he can use the computer to learn more about everyone, and Data's like, sure, and while you're at it, give me a detailed report on everything you know about the colony, and then heads off to work. After he leaves though, Lore does his best I'm totally going to screw everyone over look while dramatic music plays. Later on, the crew look over Lore's report, and it seems a giant snowflake they call a crystalline entity destroyed the colony because it feeds on all organic life in order to survive. It seems Lore has gone on a bit of a walkabout though, and Data says he should probably go check up on him. Back in Data's quarters, Lore is clearly up to some dodgy shit and looks like he's spiking a drink of champagne with something nefarious. When Data walks in, he offers him the drink and makes a toast to their mutual discovery, but whatever Lore put in that drink instantly has an effect on Data, knocking him out. As Law gloats, we learn that before he was disassembled, he learned how to communicate with the crystalline entity, and told it to come to the colony to feed, thus making him responsible for its destruction, and now plans on doing the same to the Enterprise. On the bridge, Worf picks up an unusual transmission from Data's quarters, so Riker sends Wesley to check up on him because we need to give Wesley something useful to do so he can probably save the ship again somehow. Law, now having completed the evil twin swap trope, is now sending a message to the crystalline entity when Wesley comes in. He tries to convince Wesley that he had to deactivate Law because of his general evilness, and then does that weird facial tick again. He then tries to explain that away as trying to copy Law, and then fucks up again by using language Data wouldn't use. Wesley though doesn't quite seem to buy it, but is smart enough to keep it to himself for now. Law realises he needs to deal with this twitch, so uses some gizmo to give Data the twitch, and then uses the same gizmo to fix his own twitch. On the bridge, LaForge picks up an object closing in on them fast, and it looks like the giant snowflake has found them. Law remarks how beautiful it is, and once again fucking up his use of language makes Wesley further suspicious that he's not really Data. Picard wants to know if there's some way they can communicate with the entity, so wants him to try and question Law about it. Wesley pipes up though and says they shouldn't trust that fucker, but gives no explanation why and does it in the worst possible way, so the adults of course just totally ignore him and give him a bollocking for being so disrespectful to a senior officer, so Riker escorts Wesley and Law down to Data's quarters so he can keep an eye on things. In Data's quarters, Law is giving a convincing performance about how dangerous his duplicate is and tells Riker and Wesley to wait outside whilst he gets the information they need. After they leave, Law gloats at how stupid they are before giving Data a couple of nasty kicks to the head. We're on the bridge again, and Wesley once again tries to tell Picard and Riker that he suspects Law is pretending to be Data, but is again shot down, and just as Picard is about to tell him to fuck off, the crystal entity starts to attack the ship. But Law quickly arrives and says he knows how to communicate with it, and sends a message out telling it to stop attacking. He then tells Picard he needs to go down to the cargo bay and beam a big old tree out there so they can shoot it to prove to the entity how dangerous the Enterprise is, so Picard says go for it. But it's clear now that Law is actually pretty shit at pretending to be Data, and even Picard is getting suspicious, so sends Worf down to keep an eye on him. Wesley tries one final time, and instead Picard spawns an entire internet meme.
Shut up, Wesley!
Before kicking him and Dr. Beverly off the bridge. Worf is attempting to keep an eye on things, but is ambushed in the turbolift where he promptly gets his ass kicked again, giving Law some sweet satisfaction. Meanwhile, Wesley convinced Dr. Beverly to check on Data's quarters, and because she learnt early where the power button is, she quickly turns him back on. Asking if he's alright, Data says he'll be good enough to deal with Law, and then all three proceed to the cargo bay. They try to very badly sneak up on Law, with Dr. Beverly being the only one with a phaser, and Law predictably disarms her and then tells her to fuck off or he'll turn Wesley into a human torch. She complies, but still gets shot in the arm for her idiocy, but this distraction buys Data the time to launch himself at Law, and the two proceed to briefly fight each other with obvious stunt doubles. Eventually Data manages to throw Law into the transporter pad and Wesley beams Law out into space. Dr. Beverly then arrives back with reinforcements like she should have done in the first fucking place instead of endangering her son. Conveniently, the crystal entity realises the episode is about to end, so just decides to fuck off. With Wesley saving the day once again, everyone goes back to their posts and once again the episode ends abruptly. So, another episode I generally have fond memories of, but upon closer inspection does have many of the problems all too familiar now in Season 1. Good ideas, but poor implementation. The crew are once again being stupid in order for the plot to progress, except for Wesley of course, who once again saves the day, sort of anyway, by seeing what should have been completely obvious to everyone else. There are also a host of plot holes like, if the crystalline entity wiped out the colony 26 years ago, why did the USS Tripoli not investigate it further? Did they just find Data and decide, yep, that's good enough, no need to investigate why all these colonists vanished? LaForge managed to find the secret lab without too much effort. Okay, yeah, he has his visor, but don't tell me a tricorder or some other advanced probing couldn't have found it either. There are also other questions too, like why does Picard even need to question Data's loyalty after discovering Law? It's not like he's prone to being a deceitful sort of person. Perhaps the biggest contrivance here is that Data can't use contractions, even though he has used them in previous episodes occasionally, though they at least tend to be fairly consistent with this trend after this episode. However, it's always bothered me. I mean, just why can't he use them? For such a sophisticated machine, how this simple use of language is beyond him has always just seemed completely implausible to me. But the episode makes a big deal out of it because it's a supposedly big difference between him and Law. And what's even more annoying is how Wesley is the only one to notice this. I mean, it's not like there are any other major differences, like say, I don't know, his entire fucking personality. Law just oozes smarmy superiority even when he's pretending to be Data. I'm not sure we really needed to have that facial twitch either, any more than we needed the contractions. Both Data and Lore have such gaping differences in personality that neither the audience or the crew should have had any difficulty really in keeping track of who is who. I mean, from the moment he woke up, it was painfully obvious they were going to go down the evil twin path, so really red flags should have gone up immediately with everyone to keep an eye on Lore. I realise at this point Wesley being the one to save the day has been firmly established now as an annoying trope, but in this case Wesley really was the only competent person in the crew who immediately saw the obvious clues as to Lore's deception, and it annoyed me when everyone, especially Picard, just kept dismissing him. I mean, have you guys not realised by this point, after everything Wesley has managed to do in the past, that he just might be worth listening to? And the final confrontation is a tour de force of incompetence. Once Dr. Crusher reawakens Data, they go to find Lore and confront him. But do they contact the bridge first to inform Picard? Nope. Do they contact security? Nope. Do they all arm themselves with phasers? No. Instead, Data tries to distract Lore while Crusher sneaks up on him and of course gets easily disarmed, but even worse, puts her child in direct mortal danger by having him tag along for no reason. It's only after she gets shot in the arm does she go and help, which also brings up the question of why Lore even let her go in the first place. Is he just being generous? No, it's so she can escape to call for help, obviously. But once help does arrive, rather than it being a horde of security officers headed up by Yar, it's just the main characters. Why would Picard and Riker personally come down to help? That just makes no sense at all. It's Yar's job as Chief of Security to deal with security threats whilst they stay on the bridge to command and delegate. It's just horribly messy and lazy writing. The crystalline entity itself is an interesting if batshit insane concept, but like previous Season 1 concepts, it doesn't really go anywhere except to present an external threat to the crew. An entire episode could have been dedicated to exploring this very unique lifeform, and eventually we do get that in the Season 5 episode Silicon Avatar. But here its use is wasted, and once Lore is dealt with, it just immediately flies away as if it knows its purpose in the plot has been fulfilled. The episode could have been, again, much better if it had simply left the colony's destruction a mystery with just hints of its destruction in the form of the children's drawings. It would have left more time to better structure the plot with Lore, as he tries to keep passing himself off as Data, getting more and more desperate as the ruse collapses, and instead threatens the ship's destruction through some other means, and we might have gotten even more background information on their creator, Dr. Sung. But if there is a saving grace to this episode, it is most definitely Brent Spiner's dual performance here as both Data and Lore. He does a brilliant job of differentiating between the two, which is probably best shown in Data's quarters where they have a long chat about their father and why Lore was deactivated in the first place. Data comes off as so naive and innocent, oblivious to Lore's duplicitous and nefarious nature, whereas Lore is the epitome of a smarmy, smug, superior twat with an obvious contempt for anyone else around him. I mean, just look at those faces he pulls, it just screams twat. I also really appreciated all the backstory we get about Data, and it really helps to add some depth and complexity to him, especially after we learn how Lore was basically a failure because he was so human, which made him unstable. Data was deliberately made the way he is so he wouldn't turn into another Lore, and though it means he misses out on understanding various human aspects such as humour, it gives him his insatiable curiosity and drive to learn and understand, which overall makes him a decent person. Other than this though, there's not much else positive I can say about the episode. I suppose it was nice to see Chief Engineer Argyle again, I actually kinda like him, but sadly it's the last time we ever see or hear from him again, and so the Enterprise continues on for the rest of the season without a permanent Chief Engineer. So yeah, I think it's worth watching because of all the backstory about Data and for Spiner's performance, but other than that you'll just have to tolerate all the plot holes and the stupidity of the crew. Next time we visit a planet where all the women are in charge and treat men like property in the episode Angel 1. Yeah, I'm sure that's gonna be a good one. Please feel free to leave any comments or feedback, and if you liked this episode then please do like, subscribe and share. This has been Jay Warden, signing off.